Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about One Piece villains, because this is a random topic that was floating in my head because recently I heard someone like kind of ask someone else like, oh man, what's your favorite One Piece villain? They personally said Eno. If you're unfamiliar with Eno is, you know, obviously don't want to spoil it for you, but he's a pretty good villain in One Piece. Which One Piece has very good villains, and it's an interesting thing when I thought about it, is like One Piece has a lot of good villains because of the fact is that they're all like terrible people. Like, in the fact of the matter is they're good villains because they're such horrible pieces of crap, essentially. And I've been talking about villains a lot lately, so I do apologize for that. But it's just kind of something interesting, specifically about One Piece, because I start thinking about, are there any villains that kind of turn around? Because you know there's certain storylines where villains, like people who are villains, most recently did a hero or villain with like Sylar, for example. He kind of bounced back and forth character-wise and everything like that. But then it's like, are there any One Piece villains that really bring it back? Like, the only one I can really think of is Bond, and that's kind of spoilers for One Piece, so I do apologize. But even then, it's like, even when you first meet Bond, like, he's not all over, like, he bonds with Luffy as well as just the Straw Hat crew in general. You know, especially like during the Luffy rescuing someone arc, because I don't want to spoil that for anyone that hasn't gotten there, but I think, is it a prison called Impel Down? But during that whole arc, like, Bond was like by Luffy's side, helping him and everything. So he, like, once again, he's kind of an exception because he was working with Baroque Works, you know, Crocodile, from the beginning, but when it came down to it, even at the end of the, like, the Alabasta arc, he helped Luffy and them out. So he was always kind of borderlining, like, you know, he's an antagonist, but he, you know, he ran it back, and he's one of the few villains in One Piece I feel like that does, because, you know, Buggy's kind of it, like, Buggy's still a bad guy, you know, he kind of helped, spoiler alert, during the whole like Impel Down thing too, but it's like, for him, it's like, Buggy's, you know, I guess that kind of plays into the whole aspect of him being a clown and everything, because like he kind of bounces back and forth because he's kind of like a running gag in the show, you know, having at one point in time worked for Whitebeard, and now he's, you know, part of Whitebeard's crew at one point in time, and now I guess, you know, he's off on his own trying to, you know, do his own thing, but almost kind of being unsuccessful at, to a certain extent, you know. Same thing for Crocodile, like he kind of ran it back, but even then that was kind of for self-preservation type of thing, so it's not like he's completely turning it around. But like, the point I was making is like, a lot of their villains do terrible things. Like Enel is like the biggest piece of crap. Like, he literally, spoiler alert, went to Skypiea and ran it like he was a god or something, when it's like, no, you're just some dude that ate a lightning Logia fruit, and now everyone, like, no one can challenge you, until Luffy came and then like beat the crap out of him. That's probably like one of my hands down one of my favorite One Piece moments, is simply that, like, Eno versus Luffy, because it's like, wait, what? You're not affected by my powers? Oh yeah, because you're a rubber man. That was just always my favorite thing, just like, especially Eno's surprise when it does nothing to Luffy. But I think like, they're all like, they've all done terrible things. I think the first, like, really like, oh my god, you're terrible, it's probably Arlong, because of the whole, like, he's killed people, but specifically he killed someone that was important. And I mean, don't give me, everyone in the Straw Hat crew pretty much has a tragic backstory. That was kind of like, man, villains are terrible. I mean, he's not that's not like, you know, they've all done terrible things. So it just kind of got me thinking about the whole, like, has there been any that kind of run it back? Because there's certain series, like, you know, you take Dragon Ball / Dragon Ball Z, like, technically a lot of people that you're familiar with now, I'm not adding in Super because I'm not that familiar with Super, like Tien at one point in time was an antagonist, he kind of ran it back. Piccolo was definitely an antagonist at one point in time, he ran it back. Vegeta is literally the go-to, like, example of like enemy turn forever rival, him and Goku going back and forth. Majin Buu, someone else too, Android 18, that's it. They all kind of ran it back for their own particular reasons and stuff like that. Like I said, aside from Bond, like, he's the only villain I feel like really did it in One Piece. Another series I'm familiar, well, there's two series, other like anime / mangas series that I've highly recommend, if you've never checked them out, is Medaka Box and Katsukiyo Hitman Reborn, which I know I'm probably like, I always feel like I'm butchering the first word in that title. Usually it's just kind of referred to as Reborn, but nevertheless, especially Medaka Box, it's kind of an action-y school life series, but basically every antagonist in that series, even one of the antagonists that you're kind of like, really, that antagonist pulled it back? He's almost like top tier bad guy in this series, and he pulled it back. But arguably, like, all antagonists in that series end up running it back. It's kind of spoilerish, I admit, but even then I'm like, it doesn't matter because it's the journey and the experience with each story. But it's like, I think every villain in that series, or like I said, antagonist, because it's really hard to be like villain, you know, that's a whole thing, but it's like, I think everyone runs it back in that series. And even Katekyo Hit Me Reborn, I don't think everyone does, but I think most. I'd say probably like 60 to 70% of the antagonists in that run it back, because they're kind of all Suna's antagonists for like one particular reason or another. There's only one I have in my mind where I'm like, yeah, there's at least two where I'm like, yeah, you're bad guy, but then it's like, because even they're kind of exceptions. Once again, won't go into it, but there's two particular characters I'm like, yeah, I think they kind of running back, because eventually a lot of his Suna's antagonists, you know, against Suna as well as his friends, like a lot of their antagonists end up becoming allies, as well as people who kind of help train them and stuff like that. You know, it turns into a whole thing like that. So I know, like, it was just a random topic that was in my head that I was just kind of like, I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Like, I mean, it's kind of, I guess you arguably be like a three-part question. Like, are you familiar with any like One Piece villains that you feel like kind of running back? Because anyone that's curious, the furthest I've made it in the series before like I stopped because I was catching up too quickly was Punk Hazard Island. So I know I'm like quite far behind, but like they had just finished Punk Hazard Island where I was in a story with the anime. So, but are there any One Piece villains that I'm not thinking of that you're like, oh, they pulled it back, that I might not mention? Are there any other animes that you feel like are similar that may not like have a lot of antagonists that pull it back, that a lot of their antagonists stay antagonists because it's like these are terrible, horrible people, no way they'd ever become allies? Let me know all that as well as your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you had to say about this subject. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.